Yeah.
So
It's just
what
so efficient.
what lasers do you use?
Brower timing gates. We've had them when I got here. I found them in the closet. For some reason, they hadn't been using them. Uh, People have different the dasher. What's the one with the like you got to put in the tracking units? I think the Brower's amazing. You just freaking rip through. You can read it right off there, record it. We track everything in Team Builder is what we use for our weight room stuff. So we'll just punch it right into Team Builder immediately. Not a lot of errors with it with the lasers, so I've been a huge fan of the Browers, and hopefully they don't shit the bed on us. We've had them for a long time.
You know, I used the Browers my whole time at DeFranco's. That's all we used, and I loved them. They were that the hand start. I don't like the hand start. The setting up for the lasers, 1 yard away, 2 yards away. I really like that. We got the free lap, and I gotta tell you, bro, like the amount of misfires the pre-lap the free lap has, like it doesn't register, or sometimes it registers, or it also has like the 80 centimeter bubble, so like
Yeah,
it'll get you, you know what I mean, like it's just I didn't like the free lap at all. I've had it now for 6 or 7 years, and I'm going back to Brower. I'm gonna end up buying those lasers, and I just, it's just gonna be so much easier, so much simpler. Like it was a good idea with the free lap, it just didn't work for me. I didn't like them.
yeah.
I'm going
I
back to
love the
Brower.
efficiency of the Brower. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard of this. Like for me, if you're running pretty minimal amount of reps and you want to be tedious on the amount of volume that you're hitting on anything, especially if you're ripping longer duration stuff, like you just don't have any room for misfires when you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
track stuff long term. And
Mm-hmm.
those have just been so consistent. And I tell you what, we have this pair of skills. They're like $135 on Amazon or something ridiculous. The SKLZ, the people that make like the foot ladders and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And we have two sets of those that we've gotten. One for, because we have two separate weight rooms. So sometimes we'll just logistically, if both people want the lasers, we want to have an extra set. And it's the same thing. It's just a laser that looks across. You set them up on these cones. And we haven't had very many misfires on that at all. It's just you have to get the height right. They're a little bit too low. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
starting them, you just have to place them on a different tripod instead of the cones they come with. But they've been pretty consistent for a cheap price.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I had the McCourties running flying tens with like a 25-yard buildup, and these guys were fucking humming. Like I think Devin ran like I think Jason ran a 0.86, and Devin ran like a 0.88 or a 0.87, like flying. And there was one rep where I was like, "Yo, you did it!" And I looked down, I was like, "It didn't fucking register." I was like, "That looked fucking perfect, bro. I swear that looked perfect. That was awesome." Because what was the number? I don't know. I was so angry. It was, bro, and that's happened like more often than I wish it did. Like just
For
missing
sure.
like great reps and what it should be. You know, it crushes me.
Well, and
Crushes me.
especially like we'll use ours for football camp. So if we have a prospect camp and you're ripping through 150 guys that are out there and you get 15 misfires, like it changes the whole schedule of the day. Like that would just be the absolute worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with our testing days, like when I was training Bergen Catholic, we had that, and we'd have, I don't know, 5 out of maybe 20, 25 guys that have to redo a 40. Like, fuck. Like, this is exhausting. Like, what are we? I'm going to pull his hamstring. What the hell? You know? That's, that's why I'm going back to the straight lasers. Like, the high tech stuff, like, bro, fuck this. I'll figure something else out. Like, the organization, I'm fine. Like, just give me the lasers, give me precision. I'm good with that. So when you do long to short, what distance do you start at? Oh, actually, before we go there, how long do you take to progress from 10 yards? How long do you stay at 10 yards, and how long does it take you to progress, and where do you progress to?
Yeah, usually each week, like on our short to long for the max velocity stuff, we'll start at 10 yards by our like second or third rep. I'll start even shorter just to make sure they're warmed up. We'll do build-ups in the prep, but say we're going like 6, 8, 10 each rep, holding through 40, transition into those perfect upright mechanics. And we'll just sprint floats, sprint holds, whatever the hell you want to call it, 10 yards full speed, and then hold the same speed. If I'm running 12 miles per hour, I just want to hold 12 miles per hour perfect. To where we
Why 40 yards?
Just to accumulate some high-speed distance. We'll increase that as well, out 40, 50. But, like, when you're working with the sport of football, a breakaway run, you know, your kickoff returns, like, the typical biggest distance you're getting is 40 to 60 yards, somewhere in that window. And so I want to at least accumulate them to that distance consistently early on and try and increase that high-speed distance, because that's the number one thing that we've seen with GPS across the board is if you're going to have hamstring issues, it's accumulation of high-speed distance exceeds what they can tolerate. So I don't want them to start getting high-speed distance week 6. I want them to get a little bit each week, and we'll increase it. So the average game for our receivers and DBs is about 250 to 300 yards of high-speed distance. So,
and what constitutes high speed distance?
High speed distance is going to be 80% of their top speed or faster, and then we'll also have the band of 90% and faster.
Gotcha.
And obviously, there's a higher cost to that 90%. And so, most of our receivers are typically like we have one guy who's an outlier. He's a gunner on punt. He's a jet sweep motion guy. He's a deep ball specialist, so he racks up a ton of yardage during the game. And we've got to be smart with him all week because he'll get 600 yards of high speed distance in a game. He's a freak. But most of our guys are going to be 250 to 300 with 70 or less in that 90% plus band. So if I'm looking at the 8-week summer, we'll start at, I want to get 5% higher than what they're going to hit in a game. I want them to have the built up reserve of something that they can tolerate higher than what they're going to be expected to when they get onto the field. And we'll just work 10% back from that each week. And that's kind of how I'll pick the starting point. So
what made you go higher?
I just want to make sure that they're hitting something that they can touch, because that's the average. They're going to probably hit 300 plus at some point. And to me, it's just the easiest way to safeguard them. If I know they can do this safely, shorts on, t-shirts on, full recovery in a different environment of the game with so many other variables going on, it's spaced out across 3 hours and it's a little bit more chaotic. Like, can they hit 300 yards there? Yes. Can I do it in perfect conditions with rest? I can safely get a little bit more. And they're not coming off Tuesday, Wednesday, hard practices, 6 games deep. For us, we get to dictate the entire schedule throughout the week. So accumulating those volumes as safely as we can is just the easiest way that I found to keep our hamstring injuries down. And we've drastically decreased those things. I think there's other variables. I think the Charlie Francis system is perfect for if you're working with college football. Like, you have to accumulate volume in some way. The amount of work that they get done in a 6-day window is through the roof. So if you're high every day, max speed sprinting, you're not going to get the volumes needed to help these guys on the field. So through our high days, through our long to short with the aerobic stuff, we'll do 100 yards to start out just to accumulate volume in upright running and develop the aerobic system side. And it's ridiculous, honestly, between having those aerobic days where you're building up your volumes, having your high-speed days where we're short to long, all of our repeat sprint ability tests have consistently gotten better than back in 2018, 2019 in the winter. We were doing repeat sprint ability consistently on our conditioning days, but then every day was just high, and we sucked at our repeat sprint ability test back then.
What kind of rest periods are you using on your on your low days there with more of the longer distance?
The typical work to rest of football is like 6 to 8 seconds of work, 25 to 35 seconds of rest. You're looking at 7 to 8 plays and then a long extended rest over on the sideline. So we'll go GPP phase, 45-ish to 40 seconds of rest, longer duration. So we're probably 18 to 20 seconds. Controlled tempos on the 100, 40 seconds rest. As we decrease the distance each week, and kind of with all the GPS stuff we have has been pretty insightful of just understanding what it is that they're asked to do. The accelerations, decelerations become a critical part too, of just getting them used to the high number of those. So by the end, when we go 50 yards, where every 30 seconds we'll hit a rep, distance is cut in half, work is cut in half, rest is cut in half. Same work to rest ratio. When we get to the 20s, 3 years ago, we played Wake Forest. They snapped the ball every 18 seconds. It was ridiculous. So we go 20 seconds for the 20s, and it'll be 2 steps at full speed, accumulate those accelerations, decelerations. We're going to try and get built up to about a game level of accels and decels, 70 to 90 reps on those 20s. with long extended rest in between each series, quote unquote. But we'll go 20 seconds rest to 15 rest and make it variable. 20 seconds or 15 seconds rest, just rolling through them quick to kind of prepare for the worst case scenario and the higher end, which the higher end also just allows you to get more volume when you stretch out to 100 yards. Really hard to get the reps as you decrease the distance, as you know. So through that kind of bell curve of our volumes start and will peak kind of week 3, our volumes will decrease, but our XLs, decels will go up, and the overall workloads will get a little bit harder as it goes on.
So your rest intervals are specific to the sport of football, not specific to sprint development, to speed development, pure speed development, correct?
Correct.
Why?
In the summer, that's the number one thing that we have to do is prepare them for the sport of football. Like when they get in fall camp, practice number 1 was about an hour and 42 minutes on the field of pretty high intensity work. So on those days, if they're not prepared for work efforts of football, they're just going to get cashed. And if we don't prepare them for those, I know like Tony Haller is big on the feed the catch, just sprints all the time. Everything is sprint development. But I've honestly found that with the long to short, it is a shortened rest, but you're accumulating such good quality reps of upright running consistently that guys just improve their running economy. They start to run better. You're short to long, you're maximizing your sprint development. And the only difference is obviously in the early off season, in the winter, our work to rest ratios will be significantly longer. We're just hitting the aerobic work, that long to short, to make sure we don't ever completely detrain our energy system development, but really as a supplement for sprinting. In the summer, the shift goes from if they don't get really any faster at that point, it doesn't matter. They have to be in good enough condition to play the sport and repeat those sprint distances consistently to be safe out on the field, because really reducing the risk of injury is way more important than improving their performance that last couple of weeks of the summer, especially.
So I can appreciate that. I like that. When you're doing your speed progressions, then what are you capping out at? What's the maximum distance that you're doing an all-out sprint at?
We've capped probably the furthest that we've gone. We've gone 30-meter lead in or 30-yard lead in, 10-yard fly. About 40 yards is the highest that we've maxed out at. But then we'll do our sprint float sprints. So say it's a 20-yard max effort sprint. By 20 yards for most football athletes, you're operating really close to max velocity. They'll hold that through 40 to 50 yards, 40 yards, and then we'll re-uptick sprint, float, sprint. And that's when we're hitting our highest velocities of the entire summer, and that's 50 yards at near full speed the entire time.
Mm-hmm. So when they're doing the 30-yard lead-in for the 10-yard fly, are they going balls to the wall for 30 yards and then balls to the wall for the 10?
If they're smart, no. Some of our guys will just fucking let it eat immediately. We will coach them to get a slow buildup. We're just trying to hit the max possible speed that we can from 30 to 40. On our sprint float sprints, obviously it's very different. We're trying to accumulate high speed distance immediately and get out at full speed. But the flies, our best times come from the guys that are good at a slow gradual build, because football players, nobody like Noah Lyles, whatever it was 2 days ago, hit max speed at 70 meters, which is just ridiculous impressive. All of our guys are hitting that. When we actually had about, when we ran the numbers, I think it was 60% of our guys were better from 20 to 30 than they were from 30 to 40 when we ran flies.
Yeah, I believe that. I absolutely believe that. I think a lot of it has to do with exposure too. They're never exposed to those distances, so it takes time to build it up. How long do you take to build up from the 10s to the hard 10s, then the easy 10s, then the hard 10s again? Like what the fast, easy, fast, and then the build-ups. what are those blocks like? Is it like 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks? Like how do you break it up?
The first time that we hit sprint float sprints, which for us we'll have like when we come off a spring ball in March, April, we'll have about a 4-week block where we'll very slow cook our speed stuff, kind of reestablish some weight room stuff just because we train less during those in-season periods, try and put some mass back on guys, which is a huge prerequisite for most of our guys. We're a pretty developmental program. Like we don't take a ton of JUCO guys, we don't take a ton of transfers. Like all of our guys, the plan is redshirt, develop. So increasing size and body mass is a huge impact for us. So that phase is really dedicated towards that slow exposure. We're sprint and hold 10 yards. We'll go every 2 weeks. We'll increase by 2 yards, basically. In April.
2 yards?
Yeah, April and May. Just slow increase. When we get into the summer, we should have a pretty solid base. We come off about a week and a half off, 2 weeks if guys didn't come in during the finals period. So we'll peel back about 10% from where we finished and ramp back up. But by the time we get to week 5 of the summer, we'll be hitting sprint float sprints at 15 yards, hold through 40 or hold through 30, sprint again. Then we'll increase both of them. So we'll increase the float distance by 2, increase the sprint distance by 2 each week throughout the summer. And then we take it back down week 8, just because my worst fear is someone gets hurt the week right before camp. So we'll taper that week a little bit.
So now even further, let me ask you this. Because as you were going over what you do, I was like, okay, well, how would I do it if I were in your shoes? And you go the 10, the hard 10, coast 40. I say do that for 2 weeks. Then hard 20, coast to 50 for 2 weeks. Then hard 30, coast to 60 for 2 weeks. Then you do 40 to 60 for 2 weeks. But that progression would probably be too quick for you, no?
It depends. I mean, honestly, across the team, 95% of guys would be just fine running that progression.
Which guys would not be fine?
That's the thing. Every team would be individual to that. Your hamstring risk guys on every team, it's like 2 or 3 guys that you're terrified of hurting. And they're consistently the guys that have issues. We have guys that get ridiculous workloads. There's a kid here that runs 10.6 in 100 meter in high school. He can sprint all day and just never impacted. Never seems to be sore. He can go out and rip a 40-yard dash any day of the week, I feel like. Like genetically, he is just really freaking good across the board. Then we have some guys, they run 10 yards and they're like, oh, I'm tight. It's like you have to go somewhat paint by numbers with guys, but we've had guys where we just say, hey, you're going half the distance or whatever it is. And our semi guys will peel off of, we've got tight ends that are 270 pounds. They're not running the 50-yard flies the same way that our skill guys are. Zamir Winston, one of our guys, he's a 170-pound receiver who can run damn near 23 miles per hour. He's on a little bit different progression. So we'll kind of bucket guys into those groups. And any of our high-risk guys are the ones that we'll be the smartest with in the progression. But honestly, it's a pretty idea to fast-track some of the guys that can and have shown that they can handle those workloads a little bit better and get them out to even further distances.
Nick, how many coaches do you have that are working with you with these 50 guys at once?
It depends on the time of year. In the winter, it might be 2 guys. So we try and individualize as much as we can. Like we'll have a kind of foundation card for our freshmen, which in the winter we usually don't have many. Foundation Plus is kind of our second tier, Advanced Plus. The only difference in Advanced Plus is we just have 6 velocity-based units. They'll be velocity-based rather than percentage-based. They're guys I trust more. They've been around and they're strong enough, essentially. And then on the field, we'll bucket into line, semi, and skill for all their programming. And now in the summer, we have 5 of us typically that are coaching. So we can be as individualized as we want in the summer. The winter phases are a little bit tougher with some of the larger groups, but it's no different. Our baseball guy, he'll train 40 guys by himself some nights. Hopefully, we usually have 2 guys in a group, but sometimes you'll end up with some really large groups with 1 coach. And so trying to be as individualized as you can, but doing it in a bucketed approach to where you can still get it done effectively.
Sure.
So you said on certain days you'll do different ground contact times based on the theme. Top speed days will be shorter ground contact time. Acceleration days will be longer ground contact time. What are you using to measure ground contact time, and what do you think is long and what do you think is short? Talk to me about that.
Everything would just be based off stuff I've done on force plates in the past. Like if we're doing depth drops, depth jumps with just a ground contact emphasis, like this last phase specifically, if we were looking at our max velocity days in the weight room, we were doing band resisted counter movement jumps, just bands on the bar, empty barbell. And we had the velocity based units attached to it. All we were looking for was a pogo type ground action, like as quick as you can get off the ground. That is what we were emphasizing. If you looked at it on a force plate, you were going to have really high RSI numbers on that day. The ground contact was extremely short. On our longer ground contact days, we're looking at depth jumps from higher landings where I don't care if they spend a little bit more time on the ground. I just want high force, high jump off of it. And we will also on those days do heavier loads for some of our loaded jumps. We've done, not to like mimic what those guys are doing, but our line guys, I do a lot more just dead stop, the ability to overcome inertia from those kind of weird positions. So they'll do a staggered stance barbell jump, and those guys are working up to 1 meter per second, 0.8 meters per second, 1.2. We are it would have
average velocity, velocity, not peak velocity.
Yes, which is all we have with. We use the Truve units, and then in the early off season for our longer ground contact stuff, it'll just be we'll go full range of motion for extensive jumps. We'll have them do a bar on the back squat jump instead of a repeat jump from a counter movement jump height. And we will try and make one day a little bit more of a unilateral emphasis, one day bilateral emphasis on all of those.
And are you usually going your jumps first and then your heavier weights, or are you mixing them and contrasting the jumps?
We'll go the jumps first, then get into our heavier weights after.
Do you have anything to measure eccentric speed?
Just when we bring the force plates over, which our PT department lets us use from time to time. They are a great relationship for us on campus, but on a regular day-to-day basis, no.
Okay. Remind me to text you off air about a unit that's really, really affordable to check out.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So the ground contact time stuff, it's been discouraging for me because I was talking to Stu McMillan the other day, and after talking to Rolf was like, well, doing the rebounds, the hurdle hops, it was ground contact time is way, 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 way too high for it to have any real translation to speed. And I remember thinking like, fuck me, I've been doing that for reactive elastic qualities forever. And the ground contact time on those, like that, I mean, that's Charlie Francis 101. Like that's what you do the up, then you do up, then you go up, and then you do depth into a depth jump, then you do depth to hurdles, and you do the hurdle hops. And the hurdle hops, the ground contact time of them, it was essentially just to improve first couple of steps of acceleration. That's it. And it was nothing for top speed for reactive elastic qualities. And Stu was like, yeah, I never really do them. I haven't done them in years. And he was always like, he never really understood why coaches ever did that for any kind of top speed transfer. And with the ground contact times, again, like I think the first step for most of our guys is anywhere between 1.6 to 2.0 meters per second on that first step, like coming out of your stance, 1.6 to 2.0. So for any kind of real transfer, like those are the speeds, or let's say within 10, 20% of those speeds, those are the speeds that we need to really get to, that we really need to hone in on. So if it's 1.6, let's say it's 20%, 3.2 minus 1.6, like we're talking 1.3 meters per second of peak velocity. Anything slower than that, like it doesn't have necessarily the transfer to acceleration, assuming that 20% transfers, but it doesn't have the transfer to acceleration, but it does have the transfer to improving strength. And between that and learning more about time to peak velocity, which is more, again, time to peak velocity is about the ground contact times. Do you know anything about those metrics?
Yeah, you were talking about him on, or not you, but Rolf was talking about him on one of the recent podcasts, which was super fascinating.
Yeah, and we're releasing another one tomorrow, going further into that. The time to peak velocity and the unit that I'll refer you to will measure that too. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass with stuff. But the measuring time to peak velocity and corresponding to ground contact times, the time it takes, number one, to make a change. And this is something we talked about with Rolf too. Like the time it takes to make any kind of change. I mean, Rolf does years. We got weeks, and also the time to build up to be able to appropriately do those exercises. Like it's so fucking long. It takes forever. It takes me forever to get these guys to competently do hurdle hops at like high hurdle hops. Like we'll do low hurdle hops, and it takes, the strength that they need for the ankle foot complex to actually look decent coming off. It takes like 10 weeks for these guys. It sounds ridiculous, but it takes so long. Like I'll have these guys do box jumps for sometimes 4 weeks, and then they'll do jump squats sometimes for 4 weeks. Then they'll do weighted jump squats sometimes for 4 weeks. Then they'll do a depth jump, and the depth jump will start with like a 6-inch box because I want them to rebound off the ground. I want them to react off the ground efficiently and fast and within 10% of their best jump. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing? Because like this is about reacting to stimuli in a maximal and optimal manner, not about, just exposing myself to chronically loading. I might, and then like try to overcome it. I might as well just get in the squat rack for that. If I want this to transfer to squats, to jumps, like it's got to have some kind of similar dynamic correspondence, dare I say. It's got to have some, it's got to look like the movement. You know what I mean? So it takes, and then we'll do 6 inches for 2 weeks. Then we'll do 8 inches for 2 weeks. Then we'll do 10 inches for 2 weeks and 12 inches for 2 weeks sometimes. And the progression for that. And then they're ready for hurdle hops. And even then they're only able to do 3 hurdle hops before it looks like dog shit, or 2 hurdle hops before it looks like dog shit. And then I have to do, all right, well, this week we'll do 3. Next week we'll do 4, maybe. Nope, it still looks like shit. Let's do 3. All right, finally. Now we'll do 4. Then we'll do 5. And then once we get to 5, like they seem to have it down. But like, bro, it's 16, 20 weeks of constant work. And like, that's just a jump. Like, and it doesn't, now here I am doing it for reactive elastic qualities, and it doesn't really help with top speed. And that's why I did it. These rebound jumps this whole damn time. So it's like, what the fuck am I wasting my damn time for doing all this for this type of transfer? But I mean, when I did it, and when I do things like that, like all my guys get faster. Now, are they getting faster because of the jumps? Fuck if I know. I haven't done enough controlled studies. Yeah, like do the group that does just the sprints and then just take away the jumps. Like it's the force exposure, sure. It's the ground contact time exposure. It's all these little things that like accumulate volume and intensity over time. But like, I that's it. Like I'm just so exhausted by the shit. And this is where I agree with, in some regards, with Real Rattel, where he's like, well, the shit just doesn't matter. It doesn't exist because it's so detailed and it's so specific, and the timeline for our demographic, like you're just wasting your damn time sometimes. What do you think of all the shit that I just poured on you?
I mean, I agree with a lot of it. The main idea is that, you talk about with Rolf and Will, if your athletes are getting better, that's all that matters. Do they run faster? Do they jump higher? Are they healthy? And to me, the thing that's made the biggest impact, like our young guys, I should do a study at some point, honestly. Our young guys, we don't have to do anything like ground-based explosive in the weight room from the standpoint of we're not doing loaded jumps. We're not doing Olympic lifting. We're not doing any depth jump shit like that. All we do with them is on the field, the days that they sprint, they do extensive jumps. They're going to do a jump, a bound variation, hop variation, and they're going to get good at understanding how the stretch shortening cycle operates and getting efficient off of the ground. Learn to cycle, build up some volumes to where their ankles, their feet, everything can handle actual explosive efforts because we've done it a shitload of it submaximally. And in the weight room, the only thing we do is we pair altitude drops out the ass, start at a low box, just consistently increase the height. And it's ridiculous. Some of these guys, you get them and they can jump, let's say 30 inches on the jump pad or 30 inches on the Vertec week 1, but you get them on a 24-inch box, step off and stick, and they look terrible.
Yeah.
Versus by the end of it, we'll have guys, we do altitude drops all the time. Like, to me, if you can rapidly stop yourself in a really efficient position, you're going to be a better athlete on the field no matter what you do. So we'll do altitude drops in a standard athletic position, in a lunge asymmetrical position, and then a single leg position, and try and get better at all those things of rapidly stopping yourself in an athletic position. And we'll have guys, which, it could be they're getting better at the skill of jumping, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster on the field, but just through the extensive jumps and altitude drops, guys' vertical jumps fly up. Like, every time we test, 8 weeks later, these guys have made significant improvements without really diving in on, hey, let's get this guy to jump massively higher. It's just basic stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, not to take away from anything that jumps do. Like, when you are changing direction, it's longer than acceleration. Like, you're planting and then you're trying to cutting, and you're trying to improve that. And jumps, absolutely, from a field sports standpoint, absolutely are valid and useful. What do you think of the altitude drops, but having to reverse that energy rather than stick that energy? What about picking weights or picking not weights, forces, heights that you can actually reverse, and doing that to a jump mat or from a jump mat? Have you ever done anything like that? Would you consider something like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we'll consistently do one off season. We actually did not a study, but just across the team, I wanted to see what was the highest box that they could hit and match their vertical jump. And it was crazy. We had some guys, it was a freaking 12-inch box. Some guys couldn't match their vertical jump. Some, especially some of our line guys, they're just more strength-driven jumpers. Like, them stepping off and adding eccentric force to 320 pounds did them no favors. Obviously, we want them to improve at those things. But then we had one skill guy who played in the CFL, and he was an undrafted guy for us. He jumped off of a 36-inch box and matched his best vertical jump. And being able to do that is important. But also, that's where I think the submaximal jumps and extensive jumps, you just can't get enough of those. Like, getting better at the skill of jumping, at changing direction from eccentric to concentric with a short amortization phase is just a critical skill to have no matter what you do. And exposing that consistently through a jump, a bound, a hop variation, and we'll do even our 8-vector stuff of just multi-directional. Getting better at that skill, I think, is just so important for athletes across the board.
Yeah. So what's this 8-vector thing that you're mentioning there, Nick?
A guy that used to work for me, he took it from, I think it was Bobby Stroop is where he originally got it from. He just does a lot of stuff where you have this diagram. If you want to get better at change direction, you have 135-degree angle, 90-degree angle, 45, 0 degree straight back. And there's obviously a certain degree of variance, but if I can make a 75, or if I can make a 90 and a 45-degree cut exceptionally well, I can make a 68-degree cut. You're kind of checking off all your boxes from a change direction standpoint. And I think especially the sport of football, if you watch people do change of direction drills, it's really just they're going right, turning into a linear sprint, turning. It's just shuttle runs. Nobody's hitting those in-between angles. So we'll do every week in our kind of progression, we'll do a 1-step 8-vector cut where it's just you're hitting 135, hitting 90, hitting 45, hitting a 0 degree straight back, and do 2 steps into 3 steps and do 5 yards into a reactive element where we're going to put them in situations where they have to make cuts in all those angles. And then we'll do the same thing with our jumps. So a broad jump out into 135 degree, like a continuous jump, just to overload that eccentric action of what they're going to do, into broad jump out, 90 degree cut, broad jump out, 45, broad jump 0 degree. And sub-maximally with a lot of our bounds and hops doing the same thing. I think just exposing the tissue to all those angles consistently is a good way to check off a lot of boxes and make sure that you're safeguarding them for the field.
Yeah, I like that too. I agree with that. Now, backing up a little bit, why unilateral work?
I think Mike Boyle obviously is a huge influence on unilateral to me. But if you look at the sport of football, really any sport, like when you watch what is taking place, there's so little that happens with a symmetrical bilateral stance. Everything is asymmetrical in nature. You watch O lineman, they kick slide in an asymmetrical stance. A D lineman, if I'm bracing, get my hands on someone, I've got a staggered stance. If I'm a receiver, I'm in and out of cuts off one leg predominantly all the time. And really, if you just look at what does it boil down to, okay, if we are back squatting or belt squatting, if we're doing any form of squat, what is the goal of that movement? Do we want to increase lower body strength? If that's the primary goal of the movement, switch to a single leg. Lower body strength is going to be the number one limiting factor of a split squat, bar on the back. Mm-hmm. Bar on the back squat, spinal stability is probably going to be the number one limiting factor for most people, the ability to just stay in a good upright position. And so I think if you boil it back to like, what does this movement, where's the failing point of a front squat? Where's the failing point of a back squat? Where's the failing point of a split squat or a true unilateral skater squat, single leg squat up on a bench? It's going to be lower body strength. So it's just an easier way to make sure you're actually improving that area. And to me, it happened when I was at Iowa working with our return. Like my main side responsibility was return to play athletes and then any of our injured athletes. And we had two groups that we categorized as like a torso 2 card was anyone who had like actual spinal injury. So we had a couple spondy cases who they didn't back squat, they didn't Olympic lift. They were on that card. No true axial loading for those guys. Then our torso 3 was just guys who have flare-ups and pain with some of these movements. And so we would make modifications for them. And I remember as a young coach, I'm like, these guys are just pussies, man. Like, if you can't back squat, you can't play football. What are we even doing with this card? And then I started experimenting on myself and experimenting with those guys. And all of a sudden we're doing, we have the U bars and we're loading up really heavy rear foot elevated split squats, reverse lunges. We're loading up with dumbbells. I have them on the belt squat consistently and the Kaiser squat. And these guys were making huge progress. I'm like, man, maybe this shit's not so bad after all. And I think a good program is obviously going to have both. We're still bilateral squatting. We're still doing a lot of bilateral movements, but every week we're hitting something in a unilateral fashion. I think most of your injury risk and really even just from a performance standpoint, you're going to move the needle further with a lot of unilateral exercises over just bilateral work.
And you said that you have probably 3-4 guys that go into a high risk category for their hamstrings or for pulls and stuff. What do you do to evaluate them, to categorize them as high risk? This is going back to sprinting. I'm sorry to
no. Just injury history. If we have a guy that comes in out of high school and he's like, hey, I've had 6 hamstring pulls, he's going to automatically be in our high risk area. The number one predictor of a hamstring injury is previous hamstring injury. And if you are a guy who runs extremely well, you're going to have the lower risk, obviously. I'm sure you've seen it. Football athletes don't run the best, obviously, from a – I'm sorry, my screen.
Nope.
Again, when he comes back, he's going to hit the link.
Sorry about that.
We got you.
Sorry about that.
So let me re-ask the question again.
Okay.
What causes you to put someone into the category of high risk?
Yep.
Right? Like what's high risk? How do you evaluate that? How do you dictate that?
Yeah. So the previous injury history is going to be obviously number one. And then if you work with team sport athletes, guys don't run well. Like from just an efficiency standpoint of upright sprinting, even acceleration, you get guys that run with some really terrible mechanics. So just consistent exposure to that. And anyone who has been a high-risk person, when you get out the lasers, if we're running 20-yard flies and a guy just tenses up, he's all over the place, like you have to earn the right to get on the lasers if you want to run fly sprints. Like if you're going to get out there and run terrible and be a risk, just don't let the guy do it. So you can do some technical work off to the side. We still need to get high-speed sprinting, but we can do it safer without the lasers. And honestly, in the past few years, last year and a half, I've kind of gone away from the fly sprints on the lasers just because we have so many GPS units. I can get everyone's top speed, high-speed distance throughout the day. And just the lack of, like, you put out timing gates with football guys, everybody wants to be first. They're freaking tensing up. They're running in terrible ways. Versus the more I do this, the more it's been, hey, let's just make sure they're getting high-speed distance. They're running really fast on a weekly basis, and we're not getting anybody hurt out there. And we've had very good success with that really the entire time I've been here. But I think it's improved the more that we've increased our volumes and just the efficiency, the way that we're doing it.
I like that because that's a take that I haven't heard. Whereas coaches want to encourage getting out the timing gates and the stopwatches because they want to increase competition. But with high-speed running, it's about rhythm and relaxation. And if you start tensing up too much, like everything goes out the window. I like that take. I've said a lot today.
If you get people to run 95%, like if I said, hey, Mike, run 95%, some guys will fucking run faster because they're just smooth, they're relaxed, and it looks like a better rep. And especially in the sport of football, you just have meathead guys like myself who hey, lasers are out. I'm going to beat the shit out of this guy. I got to go as fast as I can. Then you tense up. It's a terrible rep. You lunge for the line. You're just rear mechanics kicking out the back the entire time versus getting quality reps. And to me, if you're looking at even in the sport of football, max velocity is important. It's a really important stimulus, but the difference in Noah Lyles and fourth place the other night was thousandths of a second. If I'm fast, does getting a thousandth of a second, a tenth of a second even faster change my ability to make a tackle or score on a play? Who knows? You look at the simulcast on the 40-yard dash, and it's like a guy that runs a 4.3 and a 4.29 are stacked right on top of each other. Yeah. It's not that important that you need to put all your chips into that basket of we need to move the needle 1% on max velocity. We just need to be able to get 300 yards of max velocity safely and get this guy to practice all year. That's what's actually important.
I love it. Dude, I fucking love it. Hey, where can everyone find you? Do you want to be found?
Yeah, we can be found. My own Instagram, I don't post a whole lot, honestly, but I think it's Nick W DiMarco, maybe, or DiMarco W Nick. I don't know, one of those. But if you're looking for me on Instagram, you'll find me. But Elon Performance, I think we posted a lot more early on, just trying to build it up to where we could get good interns, we could hire good people. And now that we have a pretty good following, we don't post as much as we should. But follow me on either of those, and we'll have some decent information out there, hopefully from time to time.
DiMarco.w.Nick. That's your personal. And Elon Performance was the other one?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect.
Elon
Is there anything you
post a lot more?
Is there anything you want to cover that we didn't cover?
No, we probably went a little bit too long here. It looks like we're like an hour 15 into this thing.
Bro, I don't give a shit. I'll go for 4 hours. If we want to go more, we go more. Brooker, you got anything else for the man?
Nick, you seem like such a good dude. What's your favorite thing about your job, man?
Honestly, the longer I've been working with the athletes is great. Everybody loves that who works with athletes. That's why we do this. My college strength coach is on a picture back here. I went to college, I found that guy. I was like, this is a job. You get to train people in the weight room. Sign me up. This is sick. And he just had a bigger impact on me than probably anyone outside of my mom and dad. So getting to do that for people is incredible. But the longer I've done this, we've had 15 assistants in part-time roles. We've had 9 assistants in our full-time roles who have gone on to lead departments. Andrew Benham is director of Virginia baseball. Hunter Bell's director of Arkansas baseball. Jordan Newsom's with the 49ers. Like, getting to mentor coaches and hang out with just great guys who make me better, and hopefully I can make them better and make our entire department better, is really grown on me to be more fun. Is developing the coaches and developing those relationships with them is equally, if not more fun than the relationship that you get with the athletes.